My name is Marcus. I've been a paramedic in Chicago for 12 years. I've gotten used to seeing everything from shattered bones to indescribable wounds. But there's one call on a winter night in 2019 that turned my understanding of the world upside down. It was approaching 3 in the morning, the time my colleagues call the dead quiet hour. Snow was falling softly on the empty streets, and the air was so cold our breaths turned into thick vapor. I was with my partner Samantha, or Sam, in the ambulance sipping cold coffee when the tone went off. Male, early 70s, severe chest pain, difficulty breathing. The address was in an old residential neighborhood, red brick buildings dating back to the city's industrial boom days. We arrived at a dilapidated building, the elevator out of order, of course. We climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, the smell of mold and something else, something sweet and cloying, filling the air. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The apartment was dimly lit, deep shadows swaying with the flame of candles. Yes, many candles placed everywhere, on tables, on the floor. The person who called, a frail old man, was sitting in an armchair in the corner, his eyes wide with terror. But the patient was stretched out on an old couch in the middle of the room. He wore striped pajamas, his jaw slack, and his eyes were wide open, staring unblinking at the ceiling. His skin was a pale bluish color. Our training takes over, stops the emotions. I moved toward him, my fingers to his wrist to search for a pulse. His skin was cold, deathly cold, and there was clear stiffness in the jaw and neck. Rigor mortis. The man had been dead for hours. I turned to the old man sitting in the chair, the one who called us. I said to him slowly, "Sir, this man, he's dead. When did you notice he stopped breathing?" He didn't answer. He mumbled something incomprehensible. Then he said in a broken accent, "But he asked me to call." Sam, who was checking the surroundings, looked at me. Then she asked the old man calmly, "Who asked you?" He pointed a trembling finger at the dead man on the couch. "Him. He woke up an hour ago. He sat up suddenly and said he couldn't breathe. He told me to call an ambulance. Then he lay down again." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The dead don't speak. The man had been dead for hours, that was clear. Brain death, then cardiac arrest, then body cooling. I should have reassured the confused old man. That's our role. I stepped forward to do something to the corpse, to cover his face perhaps, and that's when it happened. A muffled, long and slow wheezing sound came from between the dead man's blue lips, an exhalation of foul air. Sam and I jumped back. I was never a believer in superstitions. Trapped air in the lungs can escape due to external pressure, that's science. But the eyes, they slowly closed, then opened again. Not a muscle spasm, a slow and deliberate movement. Then the head turned toward me at an unnatural angle with a soft cracking sound. He was looking directly at me with empty eyes. They were like frosted glass, vacant but focused on me. Sam screamed. I stumbled backward, smashing a vase that fell to the floor. The old man kept repeating, you see, he said he couldn't breathe." We ran. Simply put, we ran out of that apartment, stumbling down the stairs until we reached the ambulance. Sam was crying, and I was shaking so badly I couldn't get the key into the ignition. We reported an obvious death and requested the police. An hour later, we returned to the place with the police. The old man was sitting in his chair, motionless, and the dead man was on the couch, covered with a worn woolen blanket. The officer said the old man had covered him. The incident was over, officially. But what I will never forget is the old man's voice as we were leaving after filing the report. He looked directly at me and said, "You forgot to tell him it's okay. That wasn't nice of you." I went back to my car, still feeling the coldness of the dead man's skin on my fingers and its weight in the air. Sometimes at night I wake up wondering, was that just cadaveric spasms? Or did the man die so scared that the fear never left his body even hours after death? The hardest part of my job isn't seeing the dead. It's the feeling that some of them don't want to be forgotten or refuse to accept that they are dead. My name is Isabella, or Izzy. I work as a paramedic in a rural Louisiana parish. Out here, the roads are long and dark, surrounded by cypress swamps and trees draped with Spanish moss. The cause are often car accidents, snake bites, or diabetic patients in remote cabins. The only thing we really fear on hot summer nights is the fog and time pressure. But one night, time was the only thing that stopped working. It was around 1 in the morning. We got a call, a young woman's voice, terrified, broken, pleading. "Please, he's not breathing. It's my baby. Highway 317 near the old wooden bridge. Hurry." Then the line went dead. I was with my partner Dwayne, a big, quiet-natured man. He switched on the siren and we tore off. Highway 317 is familiar to us, a narrow, winding road passing through the darkest part of the swamp. The only light was from the ambulance's headlights, cutting through a wall of thick yellowish fog. After 20 minutes of driving, we should have reached the bridge, but the road seemed to stretch on forever. The trees on both sides were eerily similar, tangled above us like a tunnel. I said to Dwayne, "Are we on the right road?" He nodded slowly, then he pointed ahead, a red tail light shimmering in the fog. Finally, the victim. We approached. It was an old sedan pulled over on the side of the road, its doors wide open and the engine still running. A young woman with long black hair and a white nightgown drenched in sweat was kneeling on the roadside, her back to us, bending over something in her lap. Dwayne stopped the vehicle. I got out first, my medical bag in hand. The silence was absolute. No insect sounds, no frogs, which is very rare in Louisiana at night. Only the sound of the broken-down car's engine. I called out, "Ma'am, I'm the paramedic. What's wrong with your baby?" She didn't turn around. Her body was shaking. I thought she was crying. I approached slowly, Dwayne right behind me. When I was about 10 feet away, I heard the sound. A wet sound, a soft sucking and crushing noise. It wasn't crying. I felt nauseous. "Ma'am," I said louder. She stopped moving. Then very slowly, she turned her head toward me while her body remained bent forward. Her face was pale as chalk, but her eyes were hollow, 2 black holes like knots in a tree, and her mouth and chin were smeared with something dark. She smiled at me, a smile too wide, stretching from ear to ear, and she said in a dreamy, childlike voice, "I didn't call you." At that moment, the thing she was holding moved. It wasn't a baby, it wasn't human. It was a wrinkled, mud-colored shape with impossibly long limbs. It raised its head and looked at me with eyes that reflected the ambulance's lights, silver eyes with no pupils. Dwayne screamed a grown man's scream I'd never heard before and pulled me by the shoulder so hard I fell to the ground. We ran to the ambulance, our feet sinking into the mud. Dwayne turned the engine over and floored the gas pedal, and we sped away from the scene. I looked in the side mirror. The woman was now standing in the middle of the road, the thing in her lap waving its long arm goodbye, the smile still painted on her smeared face. But the horror wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. We drove like madmen, our only thought to get away. But Highway 317 refused to end. The road signs and distance markers disappeared. The fog became thicker, gray and heavy with the swamp's smell. I looked at the vehicle's clock, 1:15 a.m. That was strange. I felt like hours had passed. I looked at my phone, no signal. Dwayne was dripping with sweat, muttering, "This is impossible, we should have hit the main highway by now." And suddenly the headlights lit up a green road sign. It read, "Bridge 317, 10 miles. My heart almost stopped. We were driving away from it. It was behind us. How could it be ahead of us? Dwayne screamed, "No, no, no!" But the road was taking us to it, sloping and twisting with no turnoffs. Then we saw it again. The sedan, the open doors, the engine running. The woman in the white nightgown kneeling in the same position. Behind her, the thing with the long limbs was now sitting on the car's roof looking at us. Time stopped. I mean it seriously. I felt the outside world freeze. We were in a bubble of horror. I did the only thing that came to mind. I grabbed the radio, turned the frequency dial, and started reciting the Lord's Prayer out loud. I'm not very religious, but in that moment I clung to anything. Dwayne added his voice to mine, chanting gruffly, "Our Father, who art in heaven." Suddenly, the fog receded. Literally, the road opened up before us, clean black, and the road markings returned. The ambulance shot forward like an arrow. 5 minutes later, we were on the main highway seeing the lights of a gas station. We stopped there, both of us trembling. We never spoke of that night to anyone else. I wrote in my report that we lost our way, but I still wonder who really called us. The car's phone didn't work, and there were no cell towers in that area for miles. The only thing certain is that the woman's voice in the audio recording of the call was not the same voice I heard that night. The recorded voice was a normal, scared woman. But what I heard on the road was a voice that still wakes me from sleep, a childish and eager voice, and it said to me, "I didn't call you," as if she was waiting for someone else or something else. And sometimes on foggy nights, I think we might have been the meal arranged by itself. My name is Oliver, a paramedic with the London Ambulance Service. I see countless human tragedies daily, but the most terrifying have nothing to do with physical wounds. This story happened in a luxury flat in the posh Knightsbridge area, a place you'd never expect to find otherworldly horror. The call for me and my partner Chloe came around midnight. Shortness of breath, female 34, unresponsive. The address was a modern Victorian building guarded by cameras and electronic gates. The security guard met us, his face pale, and said in a choked voice, "Flat 4B, hurry." The lady called several times this week, but we didn't wait to hear the rest. We took the fancy mirrored elevator, and when the doors opened on the 4th floor, we heard the sound. A faint, muffled crying sound. The hallway light was eerily dim, and some bulbs were flickering. We stood at the door of 4B. The door was ajar. We entered. The flat was drowned in darkness except for a faint light coming from the end of a long hallway. A strange smell like rotting flowers filled the space. We headed toward the light, the crying sound rising and then fading. It was coming from the master bedroom. On the luxurious bed, we saw her, a beautiful woman wearing a silk nightdress, lying with her eyes closed. Her hand was hanging off the bed, and in her hand was a mobile phone, the screen lit. Beside the bed, on the table, was a baby monitor, its little green light blinking, and from it came the sound of an infant crying. "Ma'am?" Chloe called softly, feeling for a pulse in her neck. "She has a pulse, but it's very weak. She's unresponsive." I started checking the airway. The woman's body was cold. And suddenly, through the baby monitor's speaker, the crying rose into a sharp scream, then stopped completely. Then silence fell. Not ordinary silence, but a heavy, stifling silence, as if the air in the flat had been sucked out. Then we heard a whisper from the monitor, not a woman's voice, but a dry voice like the rustle of dead leaves saying, "Don't wake her, she's not yours." Chloe and I looked at each other. I felt the hair on my arm stand up. Chloe, who was braver, whispered, "The baby's room, quick." I moved toward the door, my flashlight cutting the darkness. The baby's room door at the end of the hall was slightly open, a faint glow coming from behind it. I slowly opened the door. The room was empty, a crib empty, pink walls, scattered toys, but no baby. The monitoring camera was mounted on the wall, its little red eye staring directly at me. The crib was clean and tidy, as if it hadn't been used in days. I turned to call Chloe, but my voice caught in my throat. In the corner, a rocking chair was moving, rocking back and forth in a steady motion, even though there was no open window or any draft. And on the desk, a baby monitor screen was on. It showed a black and white image of the bedroom we had just been in. The woman was still on the bed, and Chloe was still trying to treat her. But in the corner of the screen, something else was standing. It was not visible to the naked eye in the real room, but the camera captured it. A dark shape, unnaturally tall, standing right behind Chloe. It was bent over the woman, its long fingertips stroking her face. I screamed into the radio, "Chloe, look behind you." Through the screen, I saw Chloe straighten up and turn slowly, her flashlight sweeping the room. She didn't see anything, but the dark shape moved. It retreated slowly from the flashlight's beam, then slithered along the wall like a patch of liquid ink and disappeared into the flat's hallway. At that moment, all the lights in the flat went out. Chloe screamed and we were plunged into pitch darkness. Nothing compares to that darkness. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was physical, heavy, pressing on my eardrums. I couldn't see a thing, not even my hand in front of my face. I felt a bitter cold sweep through the room. That's when I felt the breath. Hot, foul-smelling breath right on my face. Something was standing in front of me, inches away, much taller than me. I felt its presence blocking something I couldn't see. Then it spoke into my ear, in a voice that seemed to come from inside my skull rather than from outside. "She's bleeding. She's not yours." Chloe. Was Chloe okay? I tried to cling to rationality. I reached my trembling hand into my medical bag, searching for a bit of normality. Suddenly the lights came back on. We were standing in the bedroom. Chloe was crouched on the floor crying. The woman was still unconscious on the bed, but something had changed. On her neck, bruises had appeared, dark blue marks resembling long, very slender fingerprints. They were fresh, forming before our eyes. In a broken voice, Chloe said she hadn't heard any of my radio calls. For her, the lights went out and came back in the same second. We bandaged the woman's wound, which had suddenly appeared on her neck, and transported her to the hospital. We were told later that she survived, but she lost the ability to speak. I went back to the ambulance, still shaking. When we got to the station, I noticed something on my wrist, a red mark, like a light burn in the shape of 4 dots. 4 dots, as if something had grabbed me there, something with very long fingers. 2 weeks later, I ran into Chloe by chance in the hallway. She was pale and exhausted. I asked her, "Did you find out anything about the woman?" She shook her head, then said to me in a low voice, "She died yesterday in the hospital, and they wrote the cause of death as asphyxiation. But the CCTV showed that no one entered her room all night. Oliver." She reached out her trembling hand and pulled up her shirt sleeve. On her wrist, there were the exact same 4 marks. On cold London nights, when an ambulance passes and its siren pierces the silence, I wonder how many calls we receive that aren't truly meant for us. How many things stand in the corners of dark rooms, watching silently, breathing softly over our shoulders without our knowledge. How many patients we transport to the hospital marked by that thing and marking us too. The hardest part of my job isn't saving lives. It's knowing that some lives simply are not mine to interfere with.